afternoon, or wow, there's actually a lot more of you here than I expected. Thought you guys would be pretty much bored with Agile by now. So as you heard, I'm talking about Scaled Agile Framework. That's it. End of presentation, I'm done. Have a great afternoon, guys. Kidding. So I'm going to be explaining to you what this whole new concept of Scaled Agile is and why we need it, and just give you a very brief, high-level overview of it. Firstly, I'm going to start with things that we're pretty much familiar with. Understanding the difference between Scrum and SAFe. By now, you guys know Scrum really well, majority of you at least. They're both variations of Agile principles. They both talk about releasing iterations of work in short increments. The real difference is in its name itself, Scaled Agile, which means you take Agile and you adjust it according to your size that you need. But why do we need Scaled Agile? We've got these teams that are currently working these Agile teams of 3 to 9 people, delivering work in 2 to 4 week sprints. They work pretty much independent from other teams, and they're delivering all this wonderful code. But now, what happens when you have 100 to 200 people all working on a common code base and need to deliver integrated solutions? Agile doesn't talk to this problem and how you implement Agile into this environment. And this is where SAFe really comes in and is trying to solve the problem that it's trying to solve. A refresher for some and a crash course for those who don't know Scrum. We have a product backlog. That product backlog has a list of features, which are called, a list of requirements which are called features. There's a product owner who owns this product backlog. They are responsible for maintaining the list and prioritizing these requirements. We have a Scrum Master. This Scrum Master is there to make sure that the teams are following the Agile principles, and that basically to be a nursemaid to the team, resolving any issues, running around and doing all the follow-ups that needs to be done. Then you have the people who are doing the real work, the team. They develop the code that is agreed within the sprint planning sessions and release viable product. This is done in iterations of work called sprints. This is a fixed time box of between 2 to 4 weeks. So depending where you are, you'll work anywhere between the 2 to 4 week cycle. The teams generally will have a daily stand-up meeting where they check the progress of the project, they see what is going wrong, and help each other resolve any issues outstanding. At the end of this 2-week cycle, or 3 or 4 week cycle, they have a sprint review session where they showcase what's been done to the stakeholders. The stakeholders provide feedback, the team takes that feedback and adapts it into the next iteration. There's also sprint retrospectives, where the team identifies what worked well for them as a team and what needs to be improved going forward. Now, this works well, as long as you don't have to interact with other areas. You don't need to get software from anyone else. You don't need services from another team. But what happens now when you have dependencies on other teams? How do we manage this? Let's look at an example. You need to build a software that consists of 10 different components. Each of those components have been worked on by different teams. So you can have front ends, an app, a database, services, and some mainframe systems that you're interacting with. Each of these are being handled by different teams. They're building their pieces they need to do. They've got their own product backlogs with their own priorities, and the team decides which piece of functionality they'll do in what order based on velocity. So now, we're all working on one package trying to deliver something. Soon we discover that coordinating and dependency management becomes harder and harder to do. Because now we have teams which are working at different paces and at different speeds. You end up in a situation where you have one team that's releasing a piece of software and demoing it to a client. The second team is working in an older code base and needs to upgrade to the latest version. But they can't upgrade as yet because there's a third team that's already working on an upgrade on that code base. So the second team needs to wait for the upgrade before they can move on. So you end up in this endless loop of teams waiting and trying to sync up. So now this is where SAFe comes in. It's trying to resolve that problem. So how do we solve it? For starters, all the teams should be working on the same sprints. Have the same sprint iterations, the same number of sprints to deliver that iteration of work. To be able to do that, we need to plan together. All the teams should come together and say what work needs to be done and in what order. Who needs what in what order. Once this has been agreed on, the teams will then start their sprints and carry on their iterations of work and do their reviews with their clients on their features that they're building. Towards the end of the product increment, which I'll explain a little bit later for those who don't know what product increment actually means, we have a shorter hardening sprint where all the integration issues are resolved and any outstanding development that needed all this integration to be done is completed. At the end of this, we have an integrated product demo where all the teams will show how the complete package works together as one thing. Again, they will get feedback from the clients, and at the end of the day, they're able to release viable product. That's all really SAFe really is. Taking one team who runs Agile and implementing it in a cross-domain, multiple teams. Pretty simple, actually. Now, let's look at SAFe a little bit closer and understand some of the core values of SAFe. SAFe is made up of 4 values: alignment, built-in quality, transparency, and program execution. The first value, alignment. So, like a car that's out of alignment, it's pretty much hard to steer, right? So any companies that are misaligned, they can have severe problems. So even though all the teams know which direction they're supposed to be going, if everybody is doing their own thing and is not aligned to the overall company strategy, how are we all going to get to the end point together? So it's important that all the teams are aligned, they have a clear view of what they're working on, how it fits into the bigger picture, and what the end goals are. The second value is built-in quality. So yes, this is a given. Regardless of what framework or methodology we currently work on, we're all working towards quality in our software. Now, SAFe highlights the importance of this built-in quality. So we don't end up having to redo work over and over and over again because we didn't involve people at the beginning. So it stresses the importance of having short turnaround times on your software, continuously improving your software, and make sure that all your stakeholders are always involved. So whether it's a desk check time, which means showing a client or any of the team members over your shoulder at your desk what you've done, or in a demo, viewing to a bigger audience, you need to get the people involved. Also, when we're building our software, we need to keep quality in mind and make sure we always build it into our software. And using best practices, transparency, that's our third value. Software development is hard. So things do go wrong no matter how well we plan. So it's important to be transparent of exactly where we are. We need to say what our progress is, what our concerns are, and what could stop us from going live with something. So it is important for all the teams to be open and honest with the users. And to be able to do this, they need to be transparent. Transparency is an enabler of trust. And without it, the teams are never going to build viable products that's quality and end up limiting costs to the client at the end of the day. Program execution, our last value of SAFe. Of course, none of the rest of SAFe actually matters if we are not constantly delivering value. So the teams need to focus on execution and delivering working systems and make sure that they're constantly inspecting and adapting their systems in our sprints and in our reviews, and you constantly got people involved. Then there are 9 principles, lean agile principles that SAFe is built on top of. These principles are there to make sure that companies can implement SAFe according to their needs. I will touch on it a little bit later where I say SAFe is a 4-level process, but you can actually use a 3-level process. So this allows companies, as long as you're following the principles and understands the principles, to adjust it according to your need and maturity of your company. Our first principle is taking an economic view. Don Renston said, "While you may ignore economics, it won't ignore you." It's quite a powerful statement, actually. I don't know anyone who's in business today who's ever said, "I don't care about profits. I don't care about making money. I'm doing this to pass the time. I enjoy what I'm doing." The enjoyment might be true, but I don't know about the money part so much. Surely everyone who's doing a business is there to make a profit at the end of the day. So it is important for everyone who's involved in the project, regardless of levels, to understand the economics of building systems. They need to understand how their decisions of how they're going to build something affects the bigger solution and the costs in the long run. If we don't take economics into consideration, we end up building solutions that could take much longer to deliver, end up costing a lot more to deliver, and also operating costs that are not sustainable. So this is a fundamental one that needs to be understood really well by everyone involved. Our second principle, apply system thinking. W. Edward Deming, "A system must be managed. It will not manage itself." System thinking applies a holistic approach to solution development. It takes into account, when you're building a system, the system's environment. It takes into account the system's environment when you're designing, developing, and deploying and maintaining the solution. So teams need to understand the bigger picture. If we don't know what we're building, how it fits in, why we are building what we're building, and what the end goal is for this product, how are we going to give value? How are we going to build something that's good enough for the client? In the old waterfall days, we had solutions where we built something that took 9 months. We started off with a requirement that said, this is what it needs to look like at the end of the day. Towards the end of it, we deliver something and it looks like nothing like what the client wanted. Or the client has changed their requirement and says, this actually no longer fits my need. Now, system thinking allows users to constantly get feedback from clients and adapt what they need to do. Our third principle, assume variability and preserve options. Nothing in the project environment is certain. Nothing in life is certain. No matter how well you plan, everyone knows life just happens. Say you need to be in a meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Come hell or high water, you cannot miss this meeting. You live 30 minutes away from work, so which means you'd leave 7:30. But that's peak traffic time. So you decide, I'll leave home at 7 instead. But what happens if there's a robot out or an accident along your route? So you decide, let me give myself extra time, I'll leave at 6:30. Or organize a conferencing facility for just in case the worst happens. This is a silly example, but it's a practical one that most of us have had to somehow work around and had to accommodate. It also highlights the importance of having options. We need to assume variability in our projects. This means when we start a project, even though we might think we know what all the components are and how they'll fit together and everything, the reality is we're actually really not certain. We have these beautiful pictures that are drawn up, we have these plans, and life just happens. So nothing will go according to the way you wanted it. You don't know what you don't know. You'll pick up challenges that cause you to delay your project. So we've got our estimates and they get blown out the water because something happened that you didn't expect. So when we start these projects, our uncertainty levels are a lot higher. As the team's knowledge grows within the systems, the uncertainty levels decrease. We're able to estimate a little bit better about what we are doing and delivering. We need to have options to handle the unknown and still meet commitments in an uncertain environment. We don't know what we don't know, so how do we plan for it? Our fourth principle, And this one most of you should be already quite familiar with who've been practicing Agile before. Build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. Basic. We need to build in short iterations, our sprints. Get fast feedback from clients, our sprint reviews, our desk checks that we do. We adapt in the next increment. The reason for doing this is that we are mitigating risk. If we are constantly getting feedback and changing as we need, nothing should be a surprise at the end of the day. We shouldn't be building something that's not aligned to what needs to be done. Fifth principle, base milestones on objective evaluations of systems. So in the traditional waterfall days, you have this project plan that a project manager sits and updates. That's what they did. They lived for these project plans. Nobody actually cared about them except for the project manager and maybe an exec who wanted to check how far the project is. This project manager would go hound you daily of how far have you done this, what's your progress, why are you running late? And you would end up just giving them a thumb suck about how far you are, knowing in the back of your mind, actually, you know what, this is just to shut them up so I can move on with my life. And this project manager would set this percentage complete because a requirements documentation was done and circulated, or a 200-page functional spec has been circulated, or a random value that a developer has given you based on how far they think they are with their development. At the end of the day, none of this could actually properly be verified. With SAFe, we defined percentages complete and mark milestones by viable working product, being able to deliver a working system to a client. And that's the only way you can measure your progress. Nobody cares about the documentation, nobody cares about the plans. Give us something that actually works. Don't get me wrong, there is a bit of documentation, but it's not what's important. It's about what actually works. Sixth principle, visualizing and limiting work in progress and reduce batch sizes. If you had to ask anyone in your team, how many features are in this current sprint? What is the progress in them? And what's in the backlog of things to come? Anyone in your team should be able to answer this. This is done by our traditional Scrum boards or Kanban boards, where the team has a complete view of what's to come with its priorities and where everything is. Now, to reduce batch sizes, the team does this by using the team's velocity. That is how many story points that a team can do within a sprint cycle. In a sprint planning session, they will take a whole lot of stories, put an estimate to it, come up with their story points, and then they'll decide based on priority and what they can fit, what will go into their sprint. So they will generally never take in more than what they can able to definitely deliver at the end of the project. The teams will also set work in progress limits. This means how many in-progress items am I able to have at any one point in time? So if my team has a work in progress limit of 2, I cannot pick up another task until my 2 items are complete. It's human nature that we like to work on things that we understand, we enjoy, and we don't have problems with. If we stumble and pick up something that blocks us, we'll fiddle around with it for an hour or 2, maybe a day at most, and then park it and pick up the next. So SAFe is trying to move away from that. It's focusing on a constant flow of work and making sure that the user stories are rather completed than rather just started. The 7th principle, apply cadence, synchronize with cross-domain planning. Before I go any further, I'm pretty new to the whole SAFe environment, and cadence was a new term for me. So cadence is a flow of events, a synchronized flow of events that you do on a regular basis. So a sprint is a cadence. Every 2 weeks, we are going to have sprint planning. At the end of the 2-week cycle, we're going to have sprint review and sprint retrospective. Everyone in the team knows exactly how long everything's going to take, and they know the sequence of events. That is a cadence. Now, it's important to have a cadence so we can limit wait time, so we can make wait times predictable. If we need information from a subject matter expert or some code from another team, if we plan it correctly and sequence that work correctly, we'll know exactly when we'll get it. So we're not wasting time waiting for someone to deliver something and we don't know when we're going to get it. It's scheduled and planned into our schedules properly. So each team is able to sequence work and dependencies across teams. The second last principle, unlock intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. This is the people stuff. The stuff that management doesn't like, and some of the people are going to be horrified with what I say. To create we need to create a motivating environment where work motivates people, not the money. Yes, to the juniors in the room, money shouldn't be your motivating factor. Don't get me wrong, money is important, but it doesn't keep you happy in your job. Those of us who have been at this for a while realize after a while, your bank balance, yes, it might buy you all the nice stuff, but it doesn't challenge you. It doesn't give you excitement from achieving something. We need to build these environments where work is what motivates people. And the only way to do that is people need to have the autonomy to make decisions. They need to have the freedom to be creative, and they need to be trusted. To be trusted, there needs to be transparency. So it all links up together at the end of the day. And our last principle, decentralized decision making. Everyone knows this picture. Poop flows from the top down, right? This, all it's doing is the teams should be owning their decisions. Why should everything have to go up to management? Why should we have to wait for something that we could have easily answered ourselves and made a plan, has to go through a process and all the red tape and wait 2 weeks to be able to do something that could have taken you 5 minutes to resolve? So as long as a decision is not strategic, doesn't have economic impact, is not long-lasting, and is about the day-to-day runnings of a team, there's no reason why the team shouldn't be able to make these decisions. Only things that are strategic and economic should have to go to management. So we're taking the work away from management and we're owning it ourselves. Again, only achieved because of trust and transparency. Now, those are the fundamental principles and values that need to be understood before you can effectively implement SAFe and tailor it according to your needs. So now we can look at SAFe a little bit closely. SAFe is made up of 4 levels. The first level, which is the topmost level where management sits, is the portfolio level. This looks at budgeting and the strategies and the governance around how we're implementing SAFe within the organization and how it filters down. The second level is the value stream level. This is an optional level that's used mainly by larger organizations. This looks at a solution as a whole and managing a solution end to end. The third level is the program level, which looks at planning for a program increment and how that program increment fits into an agile release train, which I'll explain shortly. And also planning for these product demos that need to be done for stakeholders. The final level is the team level, where the plebs sit, where all the real work gets done. This is basically Scrum, where the project work gets done and built and delivered. That altogether is basically what SAFe is. Let's look at the program and the team level a little bit closely, because that's where most of us work and where we would be mostly exposed to within our projects. The team level, as you know, it's our typical agile teams that we know really well. It's empowered, self-organized, self-managed, cross-functional teams of 3 to 9 people. We work in sprints. We deliver viable product that is tested, and the only way we can deliver it is a working solution. And this is done every 2 to 4 weeks. Our features are defined in user stories, and that's what the developers work off. That's basically our functional specs, these user stories. We then have a level up, which is the program level. All this really is, it's a virtual team of teams. It's a collection of all those teams that were sitting at the bottom level, all working together to deliver an integrated solution. We're all working to one common goal, to one common package, and we're all working on a fixed iteration, and we're estimating one product. So to be able to effectively work well on this team, we need to be able to plan together. and do face-to-face planning and collaboration, so we can synchronize our work that needs to be done. Value here is delivered via the features and business value that's delivered. I mentioned not too long ago an agile release train. That agile release train sits on portfolio level. So, just like the Gau train, it loads a whole lot of people as much as it can fit, and it takes them to the next station. That's all really an agile release train is. It's about what features and packages will be fitted into that one release and delivered at the end of that release. It's made up of 5 to 12 teams, depending on the sizes, which is all those agile teams which I highlighted earlier. And they work in PIs, which is program increments. A program increment is a sequence of sprints. So you take your sprints and you fit them into your 12-week, and it determines how many you have. So if we're building something and we have a list of features, and we only have 12 weeks to deliver a viable product, and something doesn't make it, it just waits for the next agile release train or art to come, which is only 12 weeks away. So there's not a long waiting turnaround time for something to be released. I also mentioned planning, and we need to plan together and work together as a team to be able to plan across teams. That planning sits on the program level. This is generally a 2-day session where all the teams get pulled into a room with all the stakeholders, every man and his dog. They're there and they come, answer questions, and plan and schedule work for the next 12 weeks. I was pretty new to my team when I got pulled into one of my first sessions of these. It was quite an educational session. I'm not even going to kid about that. My colleague and I spent 2 weeks, long hours, trying to finish all the user stories that we could for this thing. We walked in the session with 100 user stories, all complete, printed out, and there they were. Because we got told that's what we needed to have for the session. When the session started, we had the program manager first come up and introduce what we were doing. Told us why we were doing it, how it fitted into everything, and what we actually needed to do in the end of the day. So from this, then we got the program owners to come and give us a list of features and what the requirements were. And they basically gave us a talk about what each of the requirements were. At the end of the day, we didn't actually need our user stories, and they weren't even used. Each of the teams after that broke away into their breakaway groups, into their different teams, and started estimating each of the features and planning them across the 12 weeks. We did our planning, listed all our dependencies, what we needed, and we came back into a bigger session. We presented these wonderful plans that we had and the list of features that we couldn't fit in to our 12-week cycle. Our entire team was new to this whole concept, so we didn't know about the planning your dependencies with your other teams. So we all got sent back to go replan and schedule our work across the different teams. So now we learned that it was actually quite important that you needed to interact with the different teams, talk and schedule your work accordingly to what you needed. We did this, went off, presented our plans again. Again, we were left with this list of features that could not be delivered. Business immediately turned around and said to us, but we need all this, you guys just have to make it work. The teams all walked away from this saying, but that was just a waste of time. What was the point of this? We were open, we were honest, we were transparent, and business just didn't hear us. This also highlighted the fact that the maturity within the organization just wasn't there at this point in time. That they didn't understand the whole concept of waiting for the next release train. Give us what the minimum viable product is, we will give you that in 12 weeks, and then we'll just schedule the rest of the stuff in the next train. So that was my first experience with the PI planning. We are now, I think, 18 weeks down the line. We haven't delivered our first train yet. Business is up in arms about us not being able to deliver and wondering why they should keep on pushing work our way. But if we had followed the proper principles and understood everything, we would have never ended up in this situation. I just want to highlight some key roles. I'm not going to go through everything. We are familiar with the Scrum Master. That's on team level. We know exactly what the Scrum Master does. They're there to make sure everything is running smoothly and resolve issues. So just like we have the Scrum Master, we have a release train engineer. That sits at program level. The other term for a release train engineer is Scrum of Scrums. They are there to make sure that all the different teams are aligned and on track and resolve issues across the teams. We also have the product owner, again, we're familiar with on the team level. And this time we have a product manager who sits on program level. Again, this person works closely with the product owners, making sure that the product owners are communicating the right features which are aligned to the company's strategies and goals. The value stream level. This one is really used by big organizations, like a bank that is running big applications that run across different departments. For example, a banking app. Your banking app has your home loan, your car finance, your check account, and whatever else you've got. That all comes together to deliver one app. So the value stream level now starts to manage and bring all those components together. They're different trains running on their own thing, but they come together to deliver one working solution. And that's already what this value stream level is. The portfolio level, which I'm touching on very briefly, is where management sits. This is where all the epics get decided and the budgeting gets decided for these projects, and the strategies are communicated across to the different teams. That's really what the portfolio is. The one thing I forgot to mention to you guys, also there is a one-to-many relationship on this. So this means when you're looking at SAFe, one portfolio has multiple value streams. One value streams has multiple teams. So it's a one-to-many pyramid that we're looking at. And that, in a nutshell, is very briefly what SAFe is all about. If anyone wants to read a little bit more, you can go to the website of Scaled Agile Framework. The current version that's been practiced is version 4, but version 4.5 is coming out shortly. We're out of time, guys, but thank you. Please vote for me.